I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I see the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing anything. My eyes have seen the glory of the Lord. A clock small step for man. Until we return to the people, until those men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. The men who despise you and slay you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, who drill you, guide you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fire. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men, the machine minds, the machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men, you are men, you are men.
All right, let's do this. Welcome to the Rock Worldwide Show here on WSHO Sunshine 800 AM. Trey Roberts with you as I am every Saturday morning here on WSHO. Thank you for joining us. And we're trying something out a little new. We're streaming in a couple different places. We're live on YouTube. We are live on Periscope, so that means we're on Twitter, and of course we are on Facebook. So we're trying something. We're trying to up our game here at the Rock Worldwide Show, and so hopefully you appreciate the efforts that we are in fact making. Okay. So got a couple of things that I want to get into. First of all, where should we start? I know we've talked a lot over the last several weeks. We've talked a lot about vaccines. And so I kind of want to go one more story. And what we're hearing from the mainstream media, I don't even like to call them mainstream media, from the media elites, is that, vaccine hesitancy. That, if you listen to this station, you would pretty much gather that the media elite are in fact correct in some way. That you're in some way, shape, or form, you are the folks who are vaccine hesitant. And I just don't know that that's the case. And what we've really been told by the corporate elites is that it's in fact the mainstream media that is, the corporate media has been telling us that it's white men, and specifically white men who support Trump, that are the ones. They're the ones who are the most vaccine hesitant. And there's a great article written this week by Tyler Durden over at Zero Hedge, and I'll post it in the show notes. In fact, let me see if I can see if this new thing that we're doing here, paste it there and see if that'll work. And yeah, we'll see if it posts to all the different places and people can interact with the article as well. But so is it really white men? And are the Trump supporters really the ones? Are they really the ones who are most vaccine? Because that's what we've been told. And so the press alleging that MAGA hat wearing, uneducated, conspiracy theorist GOP members are to blame for this continuing pandemic. And they're going to, remember, we have a midterm election coming up pretty soon. And so they're going to point to the people who don't want to social distance. They don't want to mask up. They don't want to get the vaccine. And when the variants come, which in all of these different viruses, there's always going to be variants of viruses. They're going to weaponize COVID for the midterms, just like they did for the presidential election. It worked for them. So we have to be aware of what's worked for them. But guess what? The media lied. Huh, surprise, right? No, not surprised at all. No one here, I believe, is surprised in that fact. You know who really is the group who really is to blame for the group that doesn't want to get vaccinated? It's young, healthy people. Young, healthy people don't want to get vaccinated. And I'm not saying that actually they should, or that they're even to blame. It's just we have a random piece of how did Rush used to say that? Some random drive-by journalism, right? Some random drive-by journalism. And they're noting that, in fact, if you think back to who this disease affects, 6 months now we've been shooting people in the arms, right? And vaccine hesitancy can now be measured largely by who has not gotten one yet. So the CDC recently reported that vaccination coverage and intent among adults are lowest among those aged 18 to 39. The official data shows that from March to May, 1/4 of these young adults say they were unsure about getting vaccinated, and another quarter said that they will not get it. Now, the CDC doesn't ever mention political affiliation as a factor. Among the 18 to 39-year-olds, the rates were the lowest for those who were younger, Black, poorer, less educated, uninsured, and living outside of metropolitan areas. Let me give you who is just listen to that again. 18 to 39-year-olds, so the younger, Black, poor, less educated, uninsured, and living outside of metropolitan areas. Now, however, the media elites have not let these facts stand in the way of a good story. But to continue to blame the Republicans' narrative, the press use of public opinion poll as a basis of their reports, this is one of these things that cause 50% of the population to 100% not believe what the mainstream media is putting down. And that's how we're still seeing so many of the stories on Republican hesitancy, despite the CDC saying that it's not the case. The Washington Post has been obsessed. Look at this one particular news outlet. And these are the headlines that they've posted just in the past week of this article being written. Headline: the GOP's very stubborn vaccine skepticism. Headline: a third of white conservatives refuse to get vaccinated. A refusal showing in polling and the real world. Headline: we're in a race. GOP governors implore residents to overcome vaccine hesitancy as Delta variant rises. And the Post even did its own poll to publish this narrative even more. Headline: Washington Post ABC poll. Biden earns high marks for handling the pandemic, but many Republicans resist vaccination. Even the editors at the Washington Post, they don't even see their own bias in the news side. But the opinion side was so determined to push this false narrative that it published 2 op-eds on the topic, one from the left and one sort of kind of right. Mark Thiessen, opinion piece: if Biden wants to convince the vaccine hesitant, give Trump credit for the vaccines. Opinion by Max Boot: Republicans are preventing America from reaching Biden's vaccination goal. You see what they're doing here, ladies and gentlemen? If this is just kind of like a 2021 version of Republicans hate black people. Republicans are the racists. It's Democrats that care about black people. Now you understand that if the CDC is telling us that young, black, poor, less educated, uninsured, rural black people are the ones not getting the vaccine, do you really think that there's a lot of Republicans in that group? I would say that close to 95% of the group that the CDC has in fact identified are registered Democrats. So we're going to see that it's not slowing down. Narratives are going to continue to be perpetrated. So you can't look at the news in all of the corporate news apparatuses or outlets, whatever you want to call them. You can't listen to what they're saying, including Fox News. You can't listen to their opinion shows. You can't listen to their news shows and think that you're actually getting news. You're not. You're getting a narrative that aids and abets a particular party in our country. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we can't trust people in the media anymore. I am sorry for that. And it does make your and my job more difficult. In the chat room, by the way, if you want to kind of be a part of the program, you can go to any of the places where we are where we're streaming live: Facebook, YouTube, and also on Twitter. Just type in Kingdom Useful. And also you can go to my Linktree account. If you go to linktr.ee/Trey Roberts, Linktree/Trey Roberts, you can connect with us in all those different places and locations. But if you want to also be a part of the program, you can go to chat room like a couple of folks have already done. Ron has posted twice. Finally got off of Facebook. Good. Okay, congratulations, Ron. This is, by the way, this is, as far as the Facebook stuff goes, this is something that we're all just simply going to have to do. We're going to have to get off of Facebook. You're gonna have withdrawals. You're gonna sense the addiction that you have, because you're gonna have some anxiety especially if you have thousands of connections, thousands of friends, people that you keep up with, groups that you follow. But here's how you start to wean yourself off. Start by going into your pages, your groups, all the ones that you really don't need to get the information from them. Everything that you've ever liked, go into your likes, unlike everything. Just confuse the algorithm and unlike everything that you have liked in terms of pages, groups, topics, movies, anything of your interests. Go unlike those things and purge your page. Take down all of your photos. Just delete all your photos. Untag yourself in other people's photos. Begin to purge your footprint off of these social media companies. This is the only way. And yes, there's a huge story. I don't quite understand it yet. Ben Shapiro's got I haven't looked into it deeply. Ron's posted about it. So Ron, I don't want to go into it very, very deep. I'm going to have to look into it. But it concerns me greatly as to whether or not there seems to be coordinated collusion between social media companies and, of course, the Democrat Party. These sorts of things never benefit the Republican Party. So there's that. We'll see how it plays out. But back to this is how the media works, by the way. Ron's other comment, by the way, is this still the land USA and the land of the free? I'm not sure. I don't know. In theory, it is, but right now in practice, it definitely is not. So here's how the media works. We're talking about that vaccine hesitancy. The media is putting out a narrative right now that it's white Republicans that are the ones who are the most vaccine hesitant. And what the CDC put out is that it's actually poor rural blacks that are the most vaccine hesitant, just based on who has not been vaccinated yet. So this is how the media works. If you go through the media stories about Republicans who supposedly won't get vaccinated, there's a clear pattern. So, of course, it benefits President Joe Biden to blame the lack of vaccinations on Republicans and Donald Trump, because otherwise he would take the hit. See, if people who primarily support and vote for Joe Biden are not getting the vaccine, and you're saying that everybody needs to get the vaccine, then you're actually letting your own supporters and constituents down. Okay. So since Democrats have now, obviously retaken the White House, taxpayer-funded media outlets of like VOA, NPR, PBS, they have been cleared out of Republicans so that liberals who report and produce in these outlets can return to their agenda. So like if you allow your children today to watch Sesame Street or any of the things on PBS, you're just going to have to stop. PBS has become propaganda broadcasting service. These people go to college, they become journalists, or they become communications majors, but they're told that it's not enough to just go and do the job. You must be an activist. And that's what we're seeing. Everyone that comes out of our education system is taught to be an activist, to work for social justice, not in the sense of equality of people under the law, not for the sense of equality by being made in the likeness and image of God, but equality where everybody begins to have the same stuff. And if there is disparity, that is all the evidence that is needed to prove that there is activism that needs to be worked in. So look what the Voice of America is airing all over the world. You ready? Unvaccinated Americans whiter, more Republican than vaccinated. And the story follows the pattern of corporate media. 1, cite a poll, not stats. Okay, that's one of the key things that they do. They cite polls, not statistics. The Kaiser Family Foundation, they'll cite, but they'll never mention the CDC. And I know a lot of you out there don't trust the CDC because it's been politicized. I get it. Okay, so I have grace for you. I'm just saying. But there is a difference when you go to the CDC and the CDC evidentially says, hey, this is the collective group that at this point is not vaccinated. Okay, some of the empirical data, you can spin it, but some of it is just data. And so we need to learn how to, just like in history or in biblical studies, if you can, as much as you can work with original source material, the better chance you have of getting an accurate interpretation, an accurate understanding, and an ability to be able to accurately make decisions when trying to apply or trying to figure out what is the path forward. This is wisdom in practice, guys. This is what we have to do. The second thing they do is after they quote a poll and not actual evidence, the second thing they do is they get quotes to say that the poll shows Republicans are the bad guys. In this case, the expert is just the head of the polling company. So they bring on like Liz Hamill, okay, the director of the Kaiser Family Foundation's Public Opinion and Survey Research. And then what they do is they do what has brought them great success over the last 4 years. They blame Trump. So in this story, they did it by quoting Hamill as the expert like this. Watch. Quote, for example, she said, believing that the media has exaggerated the seriousness of the pandemic, that's something we heard President Trump saying when he was in office. It's something that Republicans are more likely to agree with than Democrats. And people who believe that the pandemic has been exaggerated are much less likely to say they want to get the vaccine. You have companies like the New York Times, they're ground zero. How do we get to this common knowledge that Republican men are the biggest holdouts for the COVID vaccine in the US? Well, to answer that, all you gotta do is go back to March 2021, when people under 65 years old were first getting vaccinated and could provide real world data. And up to that point, the public opinion polls from as far back as June 2020 were hypothetical about getting a vaccine. The New York Times often sets the narrative for the rest of the media, especially television media. This was the story in the New York Times on March 15th. Headline: as Biden confronts vaccine hesitancy, Republicans are a particular challenge. See, the Times seems to have started the system for how to falsely claim that Republicans are the most vaccine hesitant. Cite the poll, and then talk to an expert, and then blame Trump. And then the media follows the New York Times. So a lot of people wrote, this particular author, he wrote earlier about the TV networks and how they generally take their marching orders from the New York Times. And they take those stories and they put them to video. Well, since the Times used a poll from CBS to blame Republicans, and then CBS used someone else's poll to continue the hit job, well, then you get a story like this from April 7th. Headline: many Republican men are hesitant to get coronavirus vaccine. Quote, I don't think it's necessary, close quote. And then CBS followed the pattern to establish the narrative. They cited a poll, which they cited the Marist poll in partnership with NPR and the PBS NewsHour. Then they get quotes to back up the poll as facts. So they interviewed someone named Steve Mitchell, who has been polling Republicans in the state of Michigan for more than 30 years. And then they blame Trump. Now, this particular instance that I'm using right now, it doesn't blame Trump directly, but here's what it says. Quote, in an interview with Fox News, former President Trump said that he's taken the vaccine. Quote, it's a great vaccine. It's a safe vaccine. It's something that works. Close quote. And then cable TV does the same thing. They blame Republicans. CNN does a report with this headline. Quote, vaccine hesitancy among Republicans emerge as Biden's next big challenge. Close quote. They cite a poll. This was something that they did. So they don't actually take the statistics from the CDC. They take this Monmouth poll that asks if people got the shot. And then they're able to report that a stunning 43% of Republicans said that they would never likely get the vaccine. And then they interviewed, or they get some quotes from this expert, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky. They get a quote from her, and then they blame Trump. And this media bias, by the way, this pattern goes on ahead, and it actually seeps into the science. And this is the most disconcerting of all the New York Times followers, because they're the ones supposedly data-based journalists, right? Scientific America. The headline of the June issue is, quote, do Republicans mistrust science? Close quote. Here's how it explained this totally non-scientific theory. And you can go into and actually read the journal. But you know what it's going to do? It's going to quote a poll. They're going to already have scientific experts who are not Republicans, and they're going to somehow tie it back to Donald Trump. That's just the pattern. Just a pattern of what they do, and it's the pattern of how they do it. But the interesting thing to me is it's also not just a pattern, but the people that the CDC say that this is affecting the most are in fact Democrat, young, poor, uneducated, black country boys. Now, I want to kind of shift on this, because when we talk about the black community, and we talk often on here because it's something that we have now evidence that in the last 60 years, since 1960, we kind of have two periods of data. We have the Civil War up to the Civil Rights Movement, and then we have the 1960s and the successes of the Civil Rights Movement until today. And you can go and compare those things. And now, just logically speaking, think about this. If we know that the racism right after the Civil War was far greater and to a far, what would be the word? A far more intense manner. Okay. So if we're thinking about racism, there's going to not this patina of racism that we face today. Not this sense that somehow or another there's weird racism that we can't really put our finger on, that's kind of lurking, and it's so self-evident that we really can't name it because it's sort of intuitive, right? That's how it's explained to us a lot of times when we talk about racism today, which to me sounds like a lack of racism. When you begin to add in the hundreds and hundreds, just in the last 10 years, the work of Dr. Wilford Riley, the hundreds, approaching 500 just in the last 10 years of fake race crimes, of fake hate crimes, hoax hate crimes, of black people faking racism to try and get some kind of sympathy or some kind of social capital within our society. So if you like me see just anecdotally that there are oftentimes large swaths of people who are not doing well compared to the rest of society, when you look at the statistics, you see the high violence in inner cities. You see the massive numbers of incarceration. You see the disproportionate performance in our education system. Like, you see these things. And if you're a kind, loving, compassionate person, it's got to disturb you on some level. I found an article, and this is an old article. This is a 20-year-old article. Now, I just basically in the last 2 years discovered people like Glenn Lowry and Dr. John McWhorter. Now, it's been almost 15 years that I've been reading and following the work of people like Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams. R.I.P. to Walter Williams. But John McWhorter is an interesting man. He's a linguist. He's a PhD. Incredibly thoughtful, but he's been in this game for a while. And this was something that was written in City Journal. In fact, I will go ahead and post this again. Let me see if I can see if this will work here. It worked so beautifully last time. Does it work? Yeah. Cool. All right. So I posted that in all the chat rooms. So if you want to see the article, if you want it for yourself, feel free. But John McWhorter wrote this article in 2001. Now think about that. 2001. The title of the article is "What's Holding Blacks Back?" You ready for the subtitle? Here's the subtitle. It's black attitudes, not white racism, that's to blame. And one of the things I like about John is John, being a black man himself, he writes oftentimes. He writes from a perspective of his own story and his own life. And he talks about his upbringing, about how his mom made him read Roots cover to cover. She said we watched Norman Lear sitcoms, learned from Archie Bunker and crew what blacks faced in the past. She made him read accounts of Black America before the Civil Rights Movement. He learned of black lawyers working as office clerks, black classical musicians stuck orchestrating cheap stage reviews, brilliant black professors trapped in threadbare segregated colleges. He says he read about the Scottsboro Boys, Emmett Till, and the assassination of Martin Luther King. And these were all things that John says as a young man filled him with horror, but then with relief. But then relief followed by triumph. Now think about that. By the time John McWhorter got into his 20s, this was the 1990s, he says he began to feel grateful and excited to live in times of bracing progress for his race. Yet during the decade, he came to realize that this feeling made me odd man out among most Black Americans, because in every race-related debate, whether over Rodney King or O.J. Simpson, the Million Man March, the topic of Ebonics or affirmative action, every Black person I knew, many with backgrounds as comfortable as my own, started from the fierce conviction that decades after the Civil Rights Act, Whitey's foot remained pressed upon all Black Americans' necks. And for most Black Americans, the rapid increase in the Black middle class of interracial relationships and marriages and of Blacks in prestige positions had no bearing on the real state of Black America. Further, what John McWhorter observed in the 1990s, and he's writing this in 2001, is that there was this belief that whites had an inability to grasp the unmistakable reality of oppression, that it itself is some sort of proof of racism, while Blacks who question that reality are self-deluded. So he goes on and he talks about, the confrontation works of people like Al Sharpton, and there were people who were still, fighting the good fight, so to speak. And he said there are some outright myths, or at least what could be called severe distortions of the truth. And so he goes through a couple of them. Here's one. Let me pause here. Let me pause here for a second, because I want to go to the phone lines, and I want to go to the Cajun Buccaneer. Philip, good morning. How are you?
Just great. Brothers and sisters, the deep state medical people, Nazis, that's the real race.
Who's the deep state medical people? Who are we talking about? Name names.
I'm talking about people that are involved with the real New World Order, the New World Not.
Like who? Like who are we talking? Can we name a name? I mean, because that's so ambiguous. Can we name a name?
Okay, I'm gonna go with George Soros as one of the leaders, Bill the Gates of Hell being one of the leaders, and now Joe Biden and his mafia Ku Klux Klan over there. They're putting out door hangers, red, white, and blue, like it's patriotic, and they got pictures on both sides of it that show happy Black people hugging and kissing their babies and saying free COVID-19 shots. Come to 3708 Garden Oaks Drive, Tuesday, 3 to 6 p.m. Walk-ins welcome. ages 12 and up are eligible. Come now and get your chance for a $1 million lottery.
Okay, so wait, hold on real quick, Philip. Hold on real quick. So I just shared with you, I don't know if you heard, but like I just stated the CDC data that said that poor, uneducated Black people are the lowest vaccine rate right now. So it's not like people like you who are older, white, obviously Republicans, or libertarian leaning. You're not the ones who are the most vaccine hesitant. The biggest group of people who are not getting it, but I'm saying the biggest, according to the CDC, the biggest group is the people that they're trying to reach here. So like we're okay if somebody propagandizes us with images of America in the backyard of a barbecue, some fireworks, a bald eagle flying over a tree or something. Like we're okay with marketing good feelings of patriotism toward our country. So again, like
giant pyramid scheme, and they plan everybody for the fool, if you can understand what I'm saying. And it's propaganda, it's lies. You know, the Bible to me has no suggestions in it. To me, there's more than 10 commandments. And the Bible says that we must know our enemy. We're living in fear. I'm not living in fear, but all the people around us that's taking these vampire vaccinations. And
yeah, but the Bible doesn't call people like the Bible is not. This is not Sun Tzu, Phil. The Bible doesn't say know your enemy as some sort of battle plan for how to fight within the culture wars. Listen, if you want to be a culture warrior, Philip, I think that's good. I think it's necessary. I want to live. I want my children, Philip, to live in the culture that you're fighting for. Okay, I do. I promote that, but I want you to do it with some credibility behind it and not try to blend. No, Phil, you blend. You go from republicanism to conspiracy theory to the Bible and back around again. You blur it like that all the time. It's not helpful.
infiltration agency, it's propaganda, it's deception, it's blackmail, it's manipulation, it's exactly what it is. All of this stuff that's happening to us is black magic, blackmail. It's getting people scared of that. All these people out there, like I'm telling you right now, this is not a conspiracy theory. They're victims of fear. That's why they're taking the vaccination. That's why they're wearing their masks. I'll never wear a mask, and I'll never be vaccinated.
Those people are definitely fearful. Hold on real quick, Phil. Those people are definitely fearful. Now, let me tell you what the Bible does say. The Apostle Paul said that if eating meat that was sacrificed to demons stumbles your brother, then don't eat the meat, right? Paul said, I have liberty in all things, but not all things are beneficial. So how about this, Philip? If you have brothers and sisters who are genuinely scared to get COVID-19, let's just assume for a second they're not as enlightened as you are. But getting the vaccine would give them a greater sense of peace, knowing that there's a lesser chance of them getting COVID from you. Then if we're talking about putting a mask on and getting a vaccine for the weaker brethren, isn't that more Christian than fight, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah?
I'll never wear a mask because it robs me of 1/3 of my oxygen or close to it. It makes me re-inhale my own CO2 in my own packaging.
Let me ask you this, Philip. If you had to go get a surgery and the surgeon was wearing the same exact mask that they're asking us to, are you concerned that the doctor for 3 hours as he operates on your brain, are you concerned that he's getting a third less oxygen to his brain and maybe won't think right and mess up your surgery? Are you actually having that thought? And I'm going to guess the answer is no.
It is right now. There is a place for the mask, and it's right what you said it was. And it's supposed to be no place else. The mask turns normal, healthy people into ugly people. Because to me, it's an ugly thing. The mask is ugly. The people are not ugly, but the mask is ugly and obscene to me.
Hey, I bought a mask that has my own face on it. So like when you look at it, I have a big smile on my face. So I don't wear it anymore. But when we were required to wear it everywhere we went, I made sure to get a mask that actually had my face on it. So people I didn't look like I had a mask. It looked like it was just my face. There's creative solutions, Phil. That's what I'm trying to tell you. There's creative solutions. Thank you for your phone call. So I want to get back to this article. So John McWhorter in 2001 says that he asked the question, what's holding blacks back? And the thing that is holding blacks back, according to McWhorter in 2001, coming out of the 1990s, is a couple of distortions of truth, maybe even a couple of outright myths. Here's the first one. Most black people are poor, and middle-class blacks are statistical noise. Okay, so think about that. The average person, the way that they speak about black people, and this annoys me to no end, people speak of black people as if all black people are poor. They are not. Okay, almost half of blacks surveyed in a Gallup poll supposed that 3 out of 4 blacks live in inner cities. Yet in 2001, most black people are neither poor nor even close to it. By any estimation, middle-class blacks outnumber poor ones. And at last count, only 1 in 5 blacks lived in the inner city. So here's I don't know how it's changed over the last 20 years, but I would assume that most of the polls, when people think about black people, they're thinking of the majority of black people in some sort of impoverished sense. Do you understand that when you think about people in any type of poverty, you sort of look down upon them, not in a negative way where you feel better than, but like you give pity to these people. You pity them. You sort of infantilize them. You look at them like small children, incapable of taking care of themselves. Here's his second myth. Black people earn 61% of what whites do. So you've heard this. Blacks are not paid the same amount of money as white people are paid. Though accurate as a nationwide median in 1995, this figure is dragged down by the disproportionate number of single black welfare mothers. Black 2-parent families earned 87% of what white 2-parent families earned in 1995. And also distorting the median is the disproportionate number of blacks who live in the South, where wages overall are lower. So if you look at specific rates rather than at the nation as a whole, black household earnings in 1994 exceeded whites in 130 cities and counties across the nation. The problem is, and this goes back to what I was talking about with the media, you and I have to start becoming more aware of how to give specifics to people. I pressed on Phil a little bit in his phone call because I don't think what he does is helpful. I believe his passion is needed. I believe we need more people who get excited and are concerned and want to fight the culture war. We need the culture warriors. We need people on our side who are passionate about these topics. But we need people to tether that passion to solutions and not just riling people up and not just throwing out bumper stickers that are clever and well worded. And I mean, because all of that is true. It really is true. But we need to learn how to get into the data. We need to look at evidence. We need to look at things and be able to make truth statements, whether we're studying the Bible, whether we're looking at politics, whether we're looking at public policy, whatever the case is, these are the things that we need. Larry, is this what we need for this time? I think so. I don't know. I think we do. I think this is what we need for this time. Going back to John McWhorter's article, 3, what's holding blacks back? An epidemic of racist church burnings have swept across the South. Now remember, this is 2001. But there was never any such thing. According to John McWhorter, about 80 black churches were burned from 1990 to 1996. But then over 7 times that many white churches burned as well. So there you go. In Canada right now, I think there's been about, in the last 6 months or so, there's been about 80 churches that have been burned. It could just be anti-Christian sentiment and not racial sentiment. But see, when you say black churches burn, it harkens back to 1960 and see, they're still doing this. This is what they did in the 60s when we know racism was real and when racism was easy to point to and when racism existed in a big, big way. 4, the CIA created the inner cities by pumping drugs into them. Now, this one pops up from time to time. I hear it on social media, but the way it did in the early 2000s before social media was pamphlet after pamphlet at leftist marches and gatherings. McCorder points this out. He said it's oftentimes taught to many in black colleges and universities. But the San Jose Mercury's charge on this score proved false. Yes, some CIA agents aiding the Nicaraguan Contras decided to look the other way and allow them to profit from some drug sales to California. But that's hardly a plot to addict blacks in all of America's inner cities. And remember, the mass majority of blacks don't live in inner cities. So it's like a 2 for 1 that you can knock down. Myth number 5, according to John McOrder, what's holding blacks back? Because black men are disproportionately incarcerated, racism reigns eternal. And this is one that we see today. So he took care of this in 2001. So this one will definitely apply 20 years later. This belief assumes that blacks do not commit crimes any more frequently than whites. But if black men make up almost 50% of the prison population, they commit roughly 42% of violent crimes in the 1990s. And many studies have shown when severity of crime and past record are taken into account, there is no bias against blacks in the criminal justice system. It's just a very inconvenient thing. And at its inception, the war on drugs, often interpreted as the war on blacks, that had, at its origins, that had the support of the Congressional Black Caucus. You had members whose aims were to stem inner city violence. And they went to Nixon and they said, if you don't get these drugs and this violence out of the inner cities, we're going to go before the American public and we're going to call you a racist. And so Nixon started the war on drugs at the behest of the black congressional delegation. Number 6, racial profiling is racism. It can be, right? But just as often, it isn't. In some parts of the country, black men are so overrepresented in criminal activities that police officers, whether they're white or black, they would be shirking their duty as police officers to not concentrate on them. And sure, sometimes profiling ends up detaining more blacks than their rate of conviction for the targeted crimes that you would justify. But as with drivers who are recently stopped and searched for drugs in New Jersey, but even here, officers generally have acted less out of race hatred than out of a pragmatic assessment that they can fill their quotas faster by focusing on a group that commits a disproportionate share of crime. This is what got Harry Lee in trouble. Harry Lee looked at Jefferson Parish and he looked at the data. He saw the places where murders were taking place and he committed more assets to those particular areas. He was trying to prevent murder. Harry Lee was castigated, God rest his soul, when he was out and when he was still alive and he was the sheriff of Jefferson Parish, and he was ridiculed all the time because of how many assets he put into the areas. And guess where the areas where the most murder was done? Like instead of congratulating Harry Lee for trying to prevent the murder of black people, and many who were not innocent, but many who got caught up into the crossfire, many innocent people who were not dealing drugs, who were not gang banging, who were not part of the turf wars in these neighborhoods, but who were mass majority black neighborhoods. He wasn't profiling them because of racism. He was trying to prevent murder and death and crime. And number 7 in John McWhorter's list, excessive police brutality against black shows that racism reigns eternal. That's his 7th myth in this. And certainly blacks have suffered a greater police brutality than whites. But you know what? Oftentimes it's blacks that, look, most black people, if you look at the news, if I was black right now and I got pulled over, I'd be a little nervous. Because when you watch the media, all you see is cops mistreating black people. You go into it with attention. Like, this needs to be understood that black people are being terrorized by our corporate media. Now, I want to get to one last topic, and I don't really have a lot of time, but if I don't get to it, I just won't. And this is dealing with the issue of climate change. And so I want to close up here with some climate change data. This is another Zero Hedge article. This is the same author, Tyler Durden. President Biden said that climate change is an existential threat to humanity. If you remember correctly, the Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez warned us that in 2030, quote, the world is going to end if we don't address climate change, close quote. But hold on to your wallet. The left's global warming chicken littles, they insist that the sky is falling, but you don't want to know 6 key facts. So let me run through these real quick in the time that we have left. Number 1, the Obama administration Department of Energy chief scientist, a man named Stephen Koonin, he just wrote a new book called Unsettled. And in it, Koonin shows that the models relied upon by the left to predict future global warming are so poor that they cannot even reproduce temperature changes in the 20th century. Now, here's my question to you. If the models cannot reproduce past temperatures already known when the models were developed, how can they possibly reliably predict the temperatures decades into the future? Wouldn't that be just a good question? Second, Koonin's book also documents that the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the UN IPCC, their own analysis indicates that any negative economic impact that global warming eventually may have will be so modest that it warrants no action. None. So we don't need to do anything economically to change our economic system on the part of climate change. Capitalism is not aiding and abetting climate change. Third, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and again, the UN IPCC do not claim that there is a link between established global warming and natural disasters. In 2020, NOAA stated, quote, "It is premature to conclude with high confidence that increasing atmospheric greenhouse gases concentrations from human activities have had a detectable impact on Atlantic Basin hurricane activity, and changes in tropical cyclone activity are not yet detectable." Is that unbelievable? The Wall Street Journal reported that it too shows that a lack of evidence that warming is making storms and flooding worse. So again, when you hear the media report these facts, you notice a pattern here. You have to dig a little bit further. Let's see. Fourth, as the Earth's temperature has risen, natural disasters have become far less deadly. Fifth, some of the world's best scientists believe that global warming will be beneficial rather than harmful. See, if we have more carbon dioxide, more CO2 going into the atmosphere, that's not a pollutant. That's a major benefit to agriculture and other life on Earth. And this, by the way, from MIT, Richard Lenson of MIT, William Happer of Princeton, Judith Curry of Georgia Tech. These are all people that say something different than what we're told in the media. And the sixth fact, global warming saves lives. A study published in 2015 by the British medical journal, The Lancet, found that cold kills over 17 times more people than heat. This study by 22 scientists from around the world, which examined over 74 million deaths. Check out where: Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, Italy, Japan, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, Taiwan, Thailand, United Kingdom, and the United States from 1985 to 2012. This is the largest data set ever collected to assess temperature health associations. That study reported that cold caused 7.29% of all these deaths, while heat caused only 0.42%. And small changes in the temperature, they matter. Quote, moderately hot and cold temperatures caused 88.85% of the temperature-related deaths, while extreme temperatures only caused 11.15%. We cannot let the left bully us into draconian action with unfounded claims of a looming climate catastrophe. Know the facts. Global warming is not a problem. Let me just wrap up by saying this. Whether it's issues of race, whether it's the reporting on what's going on in our political landscape, whether it's issues like climate change, all of these things require an ability to look at data, to be able to find sources that report the data and then allow conclusions to be made, not narratives to be formed. See, if you believe in a system of eschatology, let's say, and then you go and read your Bible, but you don't suspend your system, you're going to find verses in the Bible that support your system. But for you to study the Bible and suspend your system and develop beliefs coming from the text, as opposed to determining what you believe and then going into the text, it's the same thing that we have to do here. You might be a conservative Republican, but you still need to go listen. You still need to go listen to media sources so that you can hear how they're spinning. You still need to tune into the Rock Worldwide show every Saturday morning here on WSHO. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up. Coming up next is Elder Mike Indes, so don't go anywhere with that. We're going to end our show right here. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Thank you to Phil the Patriot for tuning into the show and calling in as well. And just remember, oppose progressivism wherever it rears its ugly head. Illuminate the light of truth. We'll see you next week.